Hello, I am Justin Freer. I am an American composer-conductor, and it's a pleasure to be here for the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring for the first time here in Singapore and in Southeast Asia. Well, my father really was the first person to introduce me to music in a serious way. He helped me to understand what it is to compose, and he was, along with the rest of my family, very supportive in my endeavors. I was quite young when I started writing. For me, it was almost a mistake of affairs, where I started playing in a wind band when I was quite young, and it was a choice that I made, and was the fourth of four choices that I had to choose for school when I was a 9-year-old boy. And it was, of course, the one that I got, so I started performing trumpet and percussion and fell in love with music immediately. And I started writing right away, composing right away, and I was very lucky as a young musician to have a very important teacher when I was young that was supportive and nurtured my passion for music and allowed me to basically write and conduct for our ensemble at a very young age anytime that I wanted to. And for a young musician, that's very important. And so this is how I started, and as I continued my studies, I got much more serious about composition, and as a result kind of gave up trumpet and became more serious on piano. It's just very natural for composers and conductors, I think. What was it called? The very first thing I ever wrote was for wind band, for wind ensemble instrumentation, so basically an orchestra without strings. And it was my first endeavor in exploring the fascinating sounds and colors and transparencies and mixtures of textures from instrument to section to section. It was a wonderful experience, a very eye-opening experience. And I knew right away that was what I had to do, was to have a love affair with music. I think that varies from composer to composer. I think that the king of form, Beethoven, you can find everything you ever want to know about form in the Beethoven Sonata for piano. I think that where you start, it's really where you're most comfortable starting. There are a lot of times in fellowship where it's completely texture-based, other times where it's almost completely tune-based, other times where it's completely rhythmic-based, and of course many times where it's a mix of the two or the three, or many elements at once. So I think it's really about finding that important seed, that important kernel, and developing it in a way that makes sense over the long-term structure, because without structure, music really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And actually, in that way, that's one of the most amazing things about film, is that I think in composition, one of the great challenges is form, and you're given that in film. It's a nice gift. I think we all, as composers, have certain tendencies to do certain things. Maybe some of us are more texture-oriented, others are more harmonically oriented. I mean, I personally think that music is a harmony game, and everything comes back to harmony, irrespective of how important the other elements really are. But that's very difficult to answer, because each composer has, again, their idiosyncrasies, their tendencies. Sometimes they stay on a minor second intentionally all the time for this certain amount of time, and sometimes the composer uses a fifth. And you can trace music history. The greatest of composers, you're able to identify their sound because they have a sound. And instantly when you hear music from Lord of the Rings, it's so instant. And Howard has created this world of music for Tolkien, and his world is storytelling that is instantly identifiable. And in my opinion, that's one of the most difficult things to do. I think the right mindset is to always be open to all music, even if perhaps you don't like the piece. There are always things to be learned from music, from all music. And I think this is the mindset that a composer must have in order to be successful, not only in finding his or her own voice, but embracing the voices of others, which, let's be honest, the greatest of composers in the history of our craft were in some part built because of the composers before them. As we evolve more and more through music history, we should always be cognizant of that as writers and as conductors and as performers, as musicians in general. As artists, I think it's very important to pay attention to your history. I think that for me, being involved with this project, actually, I can be very honest about Howard. Howard's music has, before I was ever involved with this project, his music was very inspiring to me, and many of his passages dealing with certain rhythmic elements and certain modal approaches into harmony was for me an eye-opening approach to how to compose music for film. So as far as Lord of the Rings, Howard's a very inspiring voice for me, but there are many composers who I find inspiring, and there's more and more every day. It's the beauty of music, I think, is that you're always learning.